Good evening.
Couple Tov, how are you?
Thank God.
Oh,
So we're doing 42. Shit, wait a minute. Says here, Katav Rambam. Says the Rambam, Hachalal eno noset kapav. Person who's halal cannot do the blessing. Who's halal? Halal is somebody who is not a Kohen because his father married somebody not allowed to him, like a divorced woman. So he's called halal. Lafi sheno bekiuno. What's the reason why? Because he's not a Kohen, right? That's the bottom line. So yeah, that's Bet Yosef. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch. Again, Shulchan Aruch says, right? Halal eno noset kapav. Person who's halal cannot do the priestly blessing. Okay, is that clear? So we'll go to the next one. It says in 43, Men Gimel, Kataba Morichi, פרק הקורא המגילה עומד, in this פרק, says the מוריכי, תתוך י"ב חודש על אביו ועל אמו נוהגים שאין נושא כפיו. ושמצריכים אותו שיצא מבית הכנסת, קודם שיתחיל שליח ציבור בעבודה עד כאן. So, what is he saying here? It says in the Morichi that somebody, a Kohen, right, who's within 12 months of mourning from his parents, so he says the custom is that they don't do the priestly blessing within 12 months. So for a year, basically. Says is that he has to leave the shul when they do the priestly blessing. Because technically speaking, he's obligated, you know? So if he doesn't leave, he's going to be transgressing the mitzvah for not blessing. This is what he says, the Mordechai. So regarding this, the comments the Bet Yosef here. Says, I don't know any custom. I don't know what the purpose of this custom is. In other words, it's not really necessary, right? To have this custom. So he says, even within 7 days of mourning, you know, we're not even talking about a year, right? It's just 7 days. He says, even there, he should do the priestly blessing. Why not? You know, there's no reason not to. Why is that? So he says, the Avel, the mourner, is liable for all the mitzvot in the Torah. So why shouldn't he be liable for priestly blessing? This is what he's saying. Continues, ובשיבול הלקט, in this book, כתב שרבי יצחק בר יהודה נתן טעם. This rabbi gave a reason there, it says. למה שנהגו כהן שירה לו? What's the reason why they're accustomed that the Kohen that happens to him one more time. So it says, he gives a reason why they have this custom. Shokohen sheira lo davar bekrovim, that if it happened to him some kind of mourning with the relatives, shinam mekomo, and he changed his place. Shelo sit kapav. So then why shouldn't he? He shouldn't do the priestly blessing. Calls man shenu yosef bimkomo. All the while that he's not sitting in his place. Kimdumeli shatam lefi shekol. So he says, seems to me the reason is because shekol mi sheomed levarech, that whoever stands to bless rawi lo sheyesh sharui b'simcha. He has to be, sameach. He has to be happy. And since he's not happy, this is the reason why they absolve him. Okay. So then he continues, he says, in these countries, lo nahagu ken, that's not the custom. So it says, in any case, it's possible to rely on this. They shouldn't do the blessing within 7 days of mourning. And if there's other Kohanim in the shul, they have to go out of the shul. The time that he calls the Kohanim, in order they shouldn't transgress 3 prohibitions, as we mentioned before. Umash Katav goes on, and that what she wrote, Mordechai, that we require him to leave the shul. קודם שיתחיל שליח ציבור בעבודה, before the שליח ציבור starts the עבודה. טעמו משום דאותם שעה, באותה שעה, so he says the reason is because that at that time, he המיוחדת לעלות לכהנים. That's a time where the Kohanim are supposed to go up to do the blessing. לדוכן, וכדימינן, and like we said in סוטה ל"ח עמוד א', עמוד ב', כל כהן שאינו עוקר רגליו ברצה, it says there, as we mentioned already several times, that any Kohen who doesn't start moving by the time they say רצה, he doesn't do the blessing anymore. וכבר נתבהר בראש סימן זה, so it says, it was already explained in the beginning of this chapter, שאינו צריך להיות חוץ לבית הכנסת. He doesn't have to be outside the shul, אלא בשעה שקורא כהנים. Only when they call kohanim. That's the moment that he has to leave. Otherwise, he can come back in. Okay, very good. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Mem Gimel. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, Achar Shiva Yemei Avelut, after 7 days of mourning, Noseh Kapav, then he does already do the blessing. B'toch Shiva Yemei Avelut, Yetzeh Mibet Knesset, but within the 7 days, What he should do is leave the shul b'shah shekoreh kohanim, the time when they call the kohanim. Says the Rama here, v'yesh omrim, some say, the kol zman havelut, right, all the time of the avelut, which is right, apilu ad yud bet chodesh, until 1 year, 12 months, al aviv ve'al imo, whether regarding his father and mother, and no said kapav, he doesn't bless to the blessing. V'chen noagim b'medinot elu. So he says, right, that the custom of the Ashkenazim is to do 12 months, like we already saw in the beginning of the Bet Yosef. But the second opinion Bet Yosef was 1 week, and that's how they do the Sfaradim, it seems, because that's the way it says in the Shulchan Aruch. So again, right, the Sfaradim do 1 week, and the Ashkenazim do 1 year. So what does that mean? That they don't do the blessing all that time since they're mourning. And we said the reason is because when you're mourning, there's no simcha, there's no joy. But you have to remember one thing, right? That when we say a year, we're only talking about the parents, because the other relatives that we mourn for, we don't mourn for them for a year. So that's already different, right? Not the same thing. Okay, good.
Kabbalah Tava? These
Yes.
are the different. I think there's 7, right? Or in this case, it's just the parents. The 7 type of
What?
relatives.
What, that we do 1 year?
Yes.
We do only 1 year for the parents. That's it.
Okay. In the case of the Kohen, or just in general? Isn't that the 7?
The mourning is for everybody, but here we're talking about the Kohen, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So good. So let's go on. Now we're going to 44. Katuv od, it says in Bet Yosef, Sham Mordechai. It says also in Mordechai, B'shibole Aleket, and in this book, B'shem Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yehuda, the name of this rabbi, the Kohen Panui Eno Nosed Kapav. So he says, right, a Kohen who's not married, he shouldn't do the blessing. Ki Asharui Belo Isha Asharui Belo Simcha. Because when he's not married, he also doesn't have simcha, doesn't have joy. Rawi lemvarech, where does it say that? Yevamot, right? Samech bet amud bet. Rawi lemvarech sheyeh sharui besimcha. So it's proper for the one who blesses that he should have simcha. Kemo shematzinu beitzchak, like we find with Yitzchak achar sheachal, after he ate. Ketiv, it says, va'avarechecha ve'chen matzinu smechim v'tuv lev. There's also this verse, right? It talks about simcha also. Right, so what is he saying over here? He's saying that, we just read through this in the Parsha Shavua last week, right? That Yitzchak told to Esav, bring me some good food and write some wine, and I'll bless you. So he meant to say, right, that when I do have all that good stuff, I'll be sameach, I'll be happy. So I'll bless you with joy. So we learn from there, and also there's another book in Melachim, this Book of Kings, right, which is talking about King David when he was coronated as the king. So either way, right, we see that it's proper to have a simcha when you're doing a blessing. Okay, good. So then it says, "Vayivarcheu, vayivarchu et hamelech b'tshuvot Rashba." In the Tshuvot Rashba, Katav, it writes there, "Shesha'al hashoel al din zeh somebody asked him about this. Shematz'u katuv b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda. They found written in the name of this rabbi, the kohen panui eno nosed kapav. So they asked him about this rule, right, that we saw, and that the kohen who's not married should not do the blessing. Shiva Rashba. So the Rashba answers, Dabar zeh lo shemativ. So he says, I never heard of this custom before. Le'echad miravotenu me'olam, with our rabbis, ve'lo ra'iti le'echad mechabrea asfarim. So it's also, I never saw in the books, that rabbis wrote about this. Ve'ulai midrash hagadahi hu. So he says, maybe it's a midrash. Aval lefi Gimartino, but it says according to the Talmud, and only Rekin doesn't seem like that's the case. Shelo Yizkir et Ze Beshum Makom, because they don't mention it there in any place in the Talmud. Ad kan Lashano. Ve'af al pi shedavar kashehu lefatro to absolve b'kiyum shelo shalosh aseh. Absolve him from upholding 3 positive commandments, bechol yom, every day, betam sheino metalmud, with a reason which doesn't exist in Talmud. Kumakom kivan she'amorichi v'shiboli aleket katavua, but he says, nevertheless, since these rabbis wrote it, b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda, the name of this rabbi, v'Rashba lo nechelak mamash alav, and the Rashba didn't really argue with him. Harotzel ismoch al ri bar Yehuda. So, however, if you want to rely on this rabbi, and banu koach limchot biado, we can't really object against him. That's only when he's not in the shul. B'shash shliach tzibur koreh kohanim, when the shliach tzibur calls kohanim. Achar kach nityashavti bedavar. So afterwards he says, I thought about this more. ונראה לי שאם יש שם כהנים אחרים, פשיטא דעולה. So it seems to me, he says, that if there is other kohanim besides this guy, then it's obvious that he goes up. Ve'eno nimna, that he shouldn't refrain. Ha-katan shelo hevi shte se'arot. Why? Because even katan, who didn't bring 2 hairs, doesn't have 2 hairs, v'day eno nasui, he's definitely not going to be married, obviously. Afilu ha'achi nosed kabab. Nevertheless, he does do the priestly blessing, im acharim, with others. Ve'afilu bifnei atzmo, even by himself, it seems like it goes up. Because shekvar nidbar, because we already explained shekvar hevi shte se'arot. Shechivan shehevi shte se'arot. Since he has 2 hairs, noseh kapav, he does do the blessing bifnei atzmo by himself. Ve'af api shesatmu eno nasui, shestamu eno nasui. Even though, right, we assume that he's not married at this age. Ve'lo chayeshinan leRabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda. We're not concerned about this rabbi. Ad kan. Katav Agur, says the Agur, Shenishal Ma'arim Molan. This rabbi was asked, Lama ena kohanim nosim kapehem bechol yom. Oh, so this is the Ashkenazi custom, right? Why don't the kohanim do the right priestly blessing every day? Me'achar shehu mitzvot aseh, since it's a positive commandment. Ve'eshiv mipnei sheminhag kohanim litbol kodem kamo. So he says it seems like the reason is because the custom of the kohanim is to immerse in the mikveh beforehand. Like it says in this book, and every day it's hard for them to go into the mikveh in the winter. So he says that's why the reason now the custom is to do priestly blessing only on Yom Tov. And also because they're going to work, so they don't have time. And since if the Kohen is not called, he doesn't transgress. So he says he forced this here to justify the custom of his place. Veno must speak. He says it's not really enough of a reason, right? Bet Yosef says. Because that what you said, right? That the custom is to immerse beforehand. So this comes out to be a stringency, right? Which becomes a leniency. Tanya, but the law Tanya. שהרי טבילה של נשיאת כפיים לא הוזכרה בתלמוד. So he says the issue of going into the mikveh, right, for the priestly blessing is not mentioned in Talmud, that you need that. ואם הם נהגו להחמיר, so if they were accustomed to be stringent regarding this, ולטבול, and to immerse, למה יבטלו בשביל כך שלוש עשה? Why should they transgress 3 positive commandments because of this? בכל יום, just because of a minhag, of custom, every day, ואף על פי שאינו עובר, and even though he doesn't transgress, אלא אם כן נקרא מקום, unless he is called, כל מקום מוטב להם שיקיימו שלוש עשה. Nevertheless, he says it's better for them to uphold the 3 positive commandments, b'chol yom, every day, ולא יטבלו, and they shouldn't immerse, כיוון שאינם מחויבים, since they're not obligated, right, to immerse, מי שיטבלו, ועל ידי כן יניחו מלקיים שלוש עשה בכל יום, וישר כוחם של בני ארץ ישראל, בכל מלכות מצרים. So he says the proper thing is like what they do in Eretz Israel, and in Mitzrayim, right, in Egypt, שנושאים כפיהם בכל יום, that they do the priestly blessing every day. ואינם טובלים לנשיאת כפיים, and they don't immerse, but, nevertheless, right, they do want to do a mitzvah of a priestly blessing. So this is the custom of the Sfaradim, right, that we do it every day. But the Ashkenazim, they do like what we saw before, that they only do it on Yom Tov. Okay, good. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch, Kohen, אף על פי שהוא פנוי, right? Kohen, even if he's single, noset kapav, he does do the priestly blessing, right? So we don't do like that custom we saw, that you have to be married for that. You don't have to be married. Then says the Rama, v'yesh omrim, denu noset kapav. Some say, says the Rama, that he doesn't do the priestly blessing, because when you don't have a woman, or you don't have a wife, you have no simcha. And the one who blesses has to have simcha. So he says, but the custom is that we do the priestly blessing even though you're not married. But he says the one who doesn't want to do it because he's not married, we don't object against him. As long as he's not in the shul when they're calling Kohanim, or when they tell them to wash their hands. So it says, right, the Rama, that in the Ashkenazi countries, the custom was only to do Birkat HaKohanim on Yom Tov. Because then they're, they have Simcha of Yom Tov. And then he should bless. Not so when it comes to the other days of the year. Even on Shabbat, he says, that they're thinking about their livelihood, and the fact that they're not working. And also on Yom Tov, it says, even on Yom Tov, they only do it on Musaf only, not Shachrit. Interesting. Wow. Yeah, that's what they do. Because then they leave the synagogue and they're going to do Simchat Yom Tov. Every shachrit and musaf that they don't do the priestly blessing, so then the shliach tzibur says, right, Eloheinu v'lavotenu, right, like we saw before, this prayer, Kedele'el sof siman kuf chav chav, like we said, we saw in chapter 126. Yom Kippurim nosim bo kapayim kemo b'Yom Tov. So he says Yom Kippur they do it like Yom Tov. V'yesh mekomot shenosim bo kapayim b'neila. There's also places where they do it also with neila as well. V'yesh mekomot afilu b'shachrit. Even there's places also that do shachrit. Interesting. Okay, very good. Anybody have any questions here about all this information? Okay, so I guess we'll stop here. Bezat Hashem. Thanks for coming tonight. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Things are going well, Baruch Hashem, in Israel. They're doing a great job over there. Making war against the Nazis, and hopefully the hostages will be released, Bezat Hashem. And they'll come back to their families. So, Chazak Baruch, we'll see you tomorrow. And stay happy, Bezat Hashem, and keep praying.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Yeah.